Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Rising 44 live action. This is a 2-day campaign where we will be going live from the major events and activities and meetings surrounding the Warsaw Uprising, which took place 75 years and 1 day ago at this time. We are literally the day before the Rising began, 75 years ago, and on this day, men and women, most of them teenagers and children, would have been in Warsaw on these very streets preparing for what was going to be one of the most terrible, cataclysmic periods in their lives, and indeed periods in Warsaw's history and Poland's history. Now, what we prepared is truly special. Over 200 Poles from around the world and other people have contributed to fund this activity. This is a grassroots campaign, and I'm pleased to host this, but I'm also very, very delighted to let you know that we've got another crew on the other side of Warsaw's Old Town. Our co-host, Ola Duda, who by day is a guide at the Warsaw Rising Museum, will be at the Krasiński Place, and they have the roll call for the fallen there at that particular place. So she's going to be able to show you the emotion, the excitement, the memory, and the feelings of people over there. Now, the question that we're asking throughout the course of the lives that we're going to be doing is, what does the Warsaw Rising mean to you? We want to know your answer to that question, so you can let us know right now in the comments. We're also going to ask you to be a part of the success of the next 2 days. We want you to share this with other people. We want this to be sent on Facebook and YouTube, as well as on our website domain, www.rising44live.com. So today we're going to be online for the next hour and a half. Make sure you share us and copy us in using the hashtag Rising44Live. And tomorrow from 9 o'clock Warsaw time, throughout the course of the day, we will be at all the main events, and we have some incredibly important moments coming up. In between the live ceremonies where our crews will be at, we'll also be interviewing Warsaw combatants, and I'm going to be going out whilst Ola's over at the events. We're going to go over to her in a minute. Whilst Ola's at the event tonight, I'm going to be walking around the Old Town. I'm going to be telling you about the history of the battle that took place here throughout the course of August, a battle which became increasingly desperate. And I'm going to be going and talking to tourists, most of whom come to these beautiful recreated streets, to talk to them about what the Warsaw Rising means to them. So, this is the introduction. Be with us now, be in Warsaw for every minute, every hour and every day of the main events surrounding the 75th Uprising anniversary. I'm now going to pass over to Ola Duda, who's over at Plac Krasiński. Ola, over to you.
Welcome, my name is Alexandra Duda and I'm honored to be with you today at this live stream you may find online at hashtag Rising44Live. We are standing at the Krasiński Square at the heart of Poland in the city of Warsaw. You have this unique chance to follow the official commemorations of the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Rising. You may see that here thousands of Warsawians gathered together with so many participants of the Warsaw Rising who have come here from different parts of the world to be here together to mark these very important commemorations of the start of the Rising that happened here in the city of Warsaw 75 years ago. Historians still discuss whether the Warsaw Rising was an apocalyptic end or just a shift in between the occupants. All through the emissions of this live stream, we'll be discussing the causes and what was happening during the Rising. So please stay with us and please leave your comments. How do you feel about the Rising? What does it mean to you? We are extremely grateful to all people who contributed to this live stream because it's a grassroots initiative based totally on micro donations. And as you may see, the roll call for the fallen is about to begin, and we may see many soldiers who are here today with us, and now the national anthem of Poland is being sang. We've just listened to the national anthem of Poland. The very first words of this anthem are, "Poland shall not perish as long as we live." The real phenomenon of the Warsaw Rising is that here human hatred destroyed everything which was material, but our enemies did not manage to destroy what lied in our hearts. That's why so many people from different parts of the world come to Warsaw to discover this phenomenon of Polishness. And now I'd like to invite you to join Patrick, who's in another place, the city of Warsaw, who will deliver his story. Thank you, from the Krasiński Square.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as Ola's just mentioned, I'm going to be telling you about the history of these streets. Now, when you come to Warsaw, the Old Town will be one of the key places that you visit. And as you walk around, you'll see that the history is evident here. This is clearly hundreds of years' worth of architecture. Except it's not. Because every street, every brick and every building, every wall and every window, every roof and every interior floor has been rebuilt. And it wasn't rebuilt by the government. It was rebuilt by the hard work of ordinary Poles who were determined to rebuild the heart of the capital of Poland. Now, why was that? Well, over the next 2 days, the Rising 44 campaign, and indeed the whole of the Polish nation, will be thinking, walking, talking, listening to the stories of the men and women who, almost 75 years ago to today, 1 day's time, decided to rise up. Now let's think about the context of this decision. You have millions of soldiers of the Red Army, a veritable horde of Red Army soldiers moving at extreme speed from the Eastern Front, dedicated to taking Berlin as quickly as possible. For the long years of occupation, the Polish Home Army, the underground resistance, the biggest in the entire of the Second World War, and it's probably no underestimation to say one of the biggest in human history, has been working tirelessly. This is a state within a state. It's an underground army which is connected to a government in exile in London. And the news comes through that the Soviets are coming closer. Now, one of the things that when I spoke to Ola when I first met her, she said to me is you have to understand that the Warsaw Uprising is not just a military operation. It is very much a political operation. The Polish Home Army and the other units that are uniting against German occupation are determined to be able to take back their capital, to show the world that they are really in charge of their country. Now, as anyone who's familiar with the history of the Warsaw Uprising will know, the bloody 63-day conflict that continued from that moment on saw Warsaw brought to its knees. And as author Alexander Ritchie once described, what happened here on these streets, the very streets that you're on right now watching this live transmission, was quite literally like breaking a butterfly on a wheel. The battle in Warsaw's Old Town wouldn't begin 75 years ago to the day as intensively as it would in other areas of the city. The Polish Home Army was successful in capturing the area in which we are in now. But, crucially, they were not able, due to the low numbers of people available to be on site, the equipment shortages, the lack of time, the confusion around the start hour, etc., to be able to capture many of the important strongholds around the city, most notably the bridges, the airport, and other key strong points around Warsaw. The Germans knew this was coming. The anticipation was immense. And when I read the stories of Warsaw Uprising soldiers who were here in the city, in these very streets 75 years ago, and again, this is men and women, it's very important to emphasise, you get this sense of tremendous anticipation. You know, one other thing they often say to you is that unless you were there, you can't quite understand. We're going to talk a little bit over the next 2 days about the controversial decision to start the Warsaw Uprising, because of course, if you look at both its political and military objectives, it's hard to call it a success. Instead, the city was razed to the ground. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were murdered in some of the worst cataclysmic genocide of the Second World War, and certainly one of the most terrible urban battles that the Second World War has ever seen. Indeed, I'm always struck by the way that German soldiers reported it as being as bad, if not worse, as Stalingrad. Yes, Stalingrad. a battle which almost anyone who knows anything about the Second World War will immediately have a connection with. And yet, so few people around the world know the story of the Warsaw Uprising. Now, I want to talk for a moment as we come out onto the beautiful walls of Warsaw's Old Town ramparts to talk about the reason why we're doing this, actually, because this has been a huge effort. I'm so very proud of you, every single one of you watching right now, and I'm also extremely proud of everybody who's taken part and actually contributed to the costs. We've got some, as you know, some pretty professional film crews right now across Warsaw, and today and tomorrow they're going to be taking you live from the scene of all the ceremonies and events. We're going to have interviews, we're going to be meeting people, and this has been a tremendous logistical challenge. I may have come up with the idea several months ago, but it's been an incredible team effort, and I want to thank every single person who's working with us right now. You are also a part of this. As I've already mentioned, we're counting on you to be able to share this transmission. I want to ask you to send this on now to at least 5 people who you think might be interested in the story of the Warsaw Uprising. I'm going to pass back to Ola to let you know how things are going in a couple of minutes, but now I want to take you up to this is a particularly beautiful spot, and you can see Warsaw's Old Town, as I've already mentioned, it's been rebuilt. Now, everything you see when you walk on these streets is not historic, it's not fake. It was rebuilt with the blood, sweat, toil and tears of the people of Warsaw. And over the next 2 days, that is the story that we're going to tell. Ola, back to you.
And now we are witnessing very emotional moments because President of the Republic, Andrzej Duda, is delivering his speech. Let me try translate what he's saying, okay? Also, insurgents were absolutely exceptional. It was not just a mere fighting. It had its aim. It was for something. They were determined to win freedom. People were fed up with 5 years of terrible occupation that was imposed here by Nazi Germany. That's why they were willing to bring freedom to Poland, to drive the enemy away from our beloved country. That we were afraid what was going to happen after the end of the war, because we knew Soviets were approaching. Commanders were aware who's coming from the east, who's pushing Germans westwards. They were aware of the fact who's so close to Warsaw and who wants to take it over. That's why the Warsaw Rising was an act of politics. Because we saw the enemy at our gates. That's why we wanted to welcome Soviets as the hosts of our capital. Was there any hope that Stalin would stop? At that time, we were not fully aware of the Yalta and Tehran conference results.
Krwawiąc się na jej ulicach i rozsławiając swoje bohaterstwo i odwagę na cały świat. Można powiedzieć, że jeżeli Hitler był śmiertelnym wrogiem Stalina, to brakło mu wtedy całkowicie przezorności i wizjonerstwa politycznego.
We may say that Hitler was not a great visionary if he did not saw what Stalin was expecting.
ale tego nie zrobił. Nie zrobił tego i wykrwawił powstanie. Ale
Stalin
dzięki temu
led
zobaczył jedno.
the
Polacy
rising
są niezłomni.
die out here.
Polaków nie da się łatwo
Warsaw
ujawnić.
Rising showed us that we wanted to do something about our freedom. That's why we
Polacy są
voiced
dumni i są groźni.
our dignity so
Polakom
powerfully at
nie
that
obce jest
time.
bohaterstwo i odwaga aż do śmierci.
That's why we risked our lives at that time to show that we are a courageous nation.
Jest młode pokolenie, które nie oglądając się na krew i na rany, nie oglądając się na straty, nie oglądając się na nic,
We pay
wierzą
tribute to this
głęboko
young
w
generation at that
sprawiedliwość.
time
Także tą dziejową po prostu walczy.
who fell
Walczy
victim
o swoje państwo,
to what
walczy
happened
o wolność.
here, to all those
Jeżeli do
atrocities
tego
from the
dodamy
German
później jeszcze
hands.
żołnierzy niezłomnych, to już chyba nikt nie ma wątpliwości, dlaczego nie było tutaj kolejnej sowieckiej republiki. Tylko
We need
było
to
jedno
remember
państwo,
what followed after the end of the war,
ale takie, w którym ludzie zawsze
that
się
so many insurgents who survived were persecuted by the communists who ruled Poland.
To właśnie wam, kochani powstańcy, zawdzięczamy. To właśnie
That's why we'd like to thank you for your courage and for your dignity from those times. It was totally exceptional.
Trafiły do mnie bardzo mocno, w samo serce. Te wypowiedziane wczoraj na spotkaniu z powstańcami w Muzeum Powstania Warszawskiego.
Yesterday, when I was at the Warsaw Rising Museum, I was deeply moved by the words of Professor Żukowski, who said,
Do powstańców, ale przede wszystkim wypowiedziane do harcerzy, których
to the insurgents and to the scouts who gathered yesterday so numerously. More than 1,000 of them came together with volunteers of the Warsaw Rising Museum in the number of 700.
może to już ostatni raz.
He said
kiedy jesteśmy
yesterday,
z wami, bo przecież
perhaps
wiecie, że
it's the last time when we meet together.
Jakże straszne, drodzy, kochani, nasi powstańcy warszawscy, jest ta świadomość.
How dreadful is
że
this
rzeczywiście
conscience
czas jest nieubłagany
that
i
time
odchodzi
passes
każdego.
and you, our beloved insurgents, pass away. That's why I'd like to thank you in the name of the Republic of Poland, in the name of the young people and my humble self.
które wręczyliście nam.
That's why I'd like to thank you for the message you gave us
Przesłanie,
yesterday.
w którym najważniejszy jest ten fragment, który mówi dzisiaj za te wartości, za które myśmy walczyli, oddawali życie, nie trzeba walczyć.
In this message, you address us with values that are so important to the life of every human being.
Tak, aby te wartości trwały i aby one były kultywowane, aby się nie zatraciły.
And we need these values to build a better future for the future generations.
Jest wolna, suwerenna i niepodległa.
And we understand very well that this most important value is a free and sovereign Poland.
która musi być
The Poland that has to exist absolutely at the first place for all of us.
I dlatego chcę z tego miejsca
That's why
obiecać, abyście byli spokojni. Tu są obecne,
That's why I'd like to say that
tu jest obecne
we
pokolenie
may see so
najmłodsze.
many generations
Bo ci
gathered
z tego
today.
czwartego pokolenia niektórzy być może przyszli tutaj już ze swoimi dziećmi jeszcze małymi dzisiaj. I my wszyscy wam obiecujemy,
We'd like to
że my
promise
nigdy o tej wartości nie zapomnimy,
that
nigdy
we
jej
will
nie
never
zatracimy.
forget about the love
Przyrzekam wam
for
to
Poland.
dzisiaj jako prezydent
I
Rzeczypospolitej.
pledge that as the President of the Republic of Poland. As you have heard, the address of the President of the Republic of Poland, Andrzej Duda, is very emotional as usual. And Let me pass now the EU to Patrick, who's in the streets of Warsaw, and he would like to say a few words to you also right now. Back to Patrick.
So what we're doing in the Old Town whilst Ola and the crew were over at Plac Kościuszki is we're going to go and talk to some foreigners that are in Poland. I can see a gentleman over here. He looks like a very nice man. Hello, sir.
Hello.
What's your name?
My name is Guo Tianyi from China.
So you're from China, and you how long are you in Poland for?
I've been in Poland for 1 week.
1 week. So you've come specially to Poland for a holiday?
Yes.
Why?
Because my supervisor is my PhD supervisor Tom Turkzinski is a professor in UBC in Canada, and my son has been to Poland for a few times. Both of them suggest that I visit Poland, as I have been to many other cities like London, Paris, a lot of Europe cities.
Okay, and what are your impressions of Poland so far?
I think Poland has beautiful buildings, and they have historical sites, and you can see a lot of things. I think you will feel that Poland has a good, great history.
Now, you were at, I understand, Plac Kościuszki just a moment ago, where this ceremony was going on. What were you seeing?
Sorry?
What were you seeing when you were at this ceremony just nearby?
Yeah, I think the people, especially I met 3 young guys. They are very, very serious about the celebration, and I think they remember the history, and even the 3 boys, they are just about 15 years old, and they say, we love Poland, we will do our best to build Poland. I think the Polish people love their country.
Wow, that's extremely emotional for me to hear. What we're doing is live broadcasts about the Warsaw Uprising, which is obviously the subject of this event, and tomorrow is the W hour when this began, 75 years ago to this day. Did you know anything about the Warsaw Uprising before you came here, before you started to look at Poland, before you arrived here in Poland?
No, but I did just got a bit idea about yes, I know the war, World War II of Poland, right? And they were tagged. Poland was tagged by German in 1939 on the 1st of August or something, and I've been to that Gdansk, yes, close to Gdansk. Yeah, I don't know much about the uprising in Warsaw.
Now, what's interesting is that Chinese experience in Second World War is very little understood in the West, as we call it. You know, we don't really understand about the terrible things that happen in China, but it's also true that in the West they don't know a huge amount about what happened here in Poland. What do you think Poland could and should do to tell people, Chinese people, about its history? WeChat, we should be on WeChat, am I right?
Yeah, I think just like Poland, right? Our Chinese people and China suffered a lot in World War II. Japan invaded China, and I think Japan did cruel things to Chinese people. I read the book by American author Vanquish on a rising song. I understood from that book China suffered a lot, and Japanese soldiers were very, very cruel.
So, shall we walk this way, and perhaps I'll tell you a little bit about the Warsaw Uprising. So, did you know that the streets that we're walking on now are actually all rebuilt? They were all destroyed during the Second World War?
I don't know, but I was told that about 90% or 95% of Warsaw was destroyed in the Second World War.
And what kind of impression does it make on you now looking at these rebuilt ancient streets? Because they don't look like they're 75 years old or even younger.
I think they built all the buildings, right? Not including these buildings, very, very well. They are not. They have something. They show you something with history of these buildings, these roads. All give you the impression with some history.
Are you planning anything tomorrow? Because tomorrow is the actual anniversary. It's the 75th anniversary of the day the Warsaw Uprising broke out. Do you have any plans to be anywhere in Warsaw at this time?
Yeah, we stayed in a hotel very about 20 kilometers away from here, and we rented a car, and we will come to Warsaw tomorrow morning.
Oh, fantastic. Well, what I can encourage you to do, unfortunately we're not on WeChat, is to come onto Facebook or YouTube or our website, Rising 44 Live. So thank you very much for sharing your experience and your perspective. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So the reason why we're talking to the foreigners and the tourists that we meet here in Warsaw is, of course, because we want to find out what Warsaw looks like from an external perspective. And it just suddenly struck me as we were talking to this gentleman that although I know that China suffered very terribly before the Second World War and during the Second World War, I don't really have a great frame of reference for what happened there. And I realised something else, which is probably Poland should be doing quite a lot on WeChat to reach people like this gentleman. And now I'm shouting out to any Chinese speaker, perhaps you'd like to get in touch with me so that we can do that next year. I'm going to be travelling around Warsaw, but I want to pass back over to Ola to find out more about what's going on in Plac Kościuszki. And I'm going to go heading back into the historic market town. I'm going to tell you more about the story of the Old Town's battle throughout the course of August 75 years ago. But for now, I'm going to pass back to my colleague Ola.
Welcome back to the Krasiński Square, where we are at the official commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Rising. Right now, you're about to hear the Vice Chairman of the Organization of the Soldiers of the Home Army speaking. Let me try to translate what he's saying to you. We are extremely proud of all those people who struggled for freedom in the times of World War II. Let's hold them in our memory. So many people are interested in the subject of the Warsaw Rising and what happened to Poland during World War II. There are so many institutions that help us to keep this memory alive.
Poparte były one w pełni świadomym zrozumieniem idei i etosu powstania.
Apart from unveiling numerous monuments, we'd like people to keep in memory all what happened in those terrible times for our country.
Szanujmy ich nieufność wobec ideału. Niemniej jednak są kanony, wzorce, które my powstańcy staraliśmy się im przekazać.
We try to pass the values that were so important to us onto the younger generations. In the past, we used to have great teachers. We belonged to scout organizations who showed us what's really important in our lives.
Mamy obowiązek naszym następcom, młodym ludziom, którzy z niedalekiej przyszłości
Today it's our duty to work with younger generations and to show them what was so important during the Warsaw Rising for us.
Ponieważ są oni
naszą przyszłością i nadzieją.
The young ones are our future. That's why we should work with them on an everyday basis.
Płynne pokolenie, iż młodzież jest najbardziej reprezentatywnym przykładem tego, czym będziemy dziś i jutro. Reprezentują to, co najbardziej cenimy w naszej przeszłości, a zarazem to, czego odruchowo nie znosimy, ponieważ nie okazało się wieczne, lecz zmienne, płynne. Zmiany, jakie zaszły w ostatnim 30-leciu, stanowią nie lada wyzwanie.
What happened in the past 30 years in Poland constitute a real challenge for the Polish society.
Czasów, gdzie dom i szkoła były źródłem kształtowania dobrych podstaw, chcielibyśmy, aby nauczyciele znów stali
That's why we'd like
przewodnikami w edukacji.
teachers and schools to be still very formative for young generations, so that young people learn what's crucial to good living.
Doświadczonych życiem powstańców. Te marzenia można spełnić poprzez zwiększenie zaangażowania osób rządzących w edukację.
That's why we'd like the government to participate more in creating
wykształconych, kreatywnych, tolerancyjnych
curricula that would make the patriotic upbringing more expanded at schools. Thank you for your attention. And as you may see, we have lots of people who have gathered here at the Krasiński Square, which is very important on the map of the Warsaw Rising, because it was here where the airdrops were dropped. And let me go back to those very important moments in the past during the Warsaw Rising, when lots of crews from the Brindisi British airport came here with the supplies. They would drop ammunition, weapons, medical aid to supply insurgents here. And now let's go back to the stage, because the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, is about to address the gathered insurgents and people of Warsaw.
Szanowni goście,
Dear guests,
szanowni warszawiacy,
dear Warsawians,
chciałem też specjalnie przywitać, bo to ma wymiar symboliczny, ministra spraw zagranicznych Republiki Federalnej Niemiec.
I'd like to welcome our guests from abroad, from Tel Aviv and Germany, who joined us today.
Polski, ale również dla Europy i dla całego świata.
Warsaw Rising was a very important event, not only for Poland but also for Europe.
75 lat temu wybuchło powstanie warszawskie.
Warsaw Rising erupted 75 years ago. We are here today to pay tribute to the insurgents.
To moment niesłychanie podniosły.
This is a very solemn moment when we ask ourselves,
Po pierwsze,
first,
dlaczego powstanie wybuchło?
why did the rising
Przede wszystkim
start?
jaka płynie z tego powstania dla nas wszystkich lekcja?
What we may learn
75 lat temu,
from these events.
1 sierpnia,
On August the 1st, 1944,
niedaleko stąd,
not far away from here,
niedaleko placu bankowego, wychodzi grupa 62
a group of 62 men went to the rising.
kompanii ochrony sztabu komendy obszaru warszawskiego. To byli naprawdę twardzi chłopcy. Część z nich wywodziła się z
These young
oddziałów,
boys were really
które
tough.
likwidowały konfidentów.
They were engaged in
To był oddział,
conspiracy
który
for
był bardzo
5
dobrze
years
wyposażony w dobrą broń,
and had
ponieważ miał
weapons.
bronić sztabu. Wychodzi o 16:20.
They
Dlaczego
left
wychodzi o 16:20?
at
Dlatego, że
4:20
trzeba zdążyć na ulicę Sienkiewicza, gdzie mieści się sztab.
to be
To było.
ready at 5
40
p.m.
minut trzeba wyjść wcześniej. Dlaczego
to
na
join
ulicy Rymarskiej 6? To było miejsce,
all
w którym
gathered at
mieszkała
the gathering
rodzina, w
point.
której dwie osoby były zaangażowane w konspirację. Tam się przechowywało broń. I te dwie osoby
dbały o to mieszkanie, ponieważ rodzice z dwójką młodszych córek wyjechali poza Warszawę, bo czuli, co się święci z młodszymi córkami, z dziećmi. Stamtąd wychodzi ta grupa, ma dojść na ulicę Sienkiewicza, jest 16:20.
They need to reach Sienkiewicza Street.
Spotyka ich oddział Wehrmachtu.
At Senatorska Street, they meet Wehrmacht unit. So, 30 minutes before the Warsaw Rising was about to start, the rising started indeed with an exchange of fire. One of the first soldiers who started to shoot was Andrzej. And I want you to remember this young boy who wants to fight. He had British stand in his hands. But the problem was that this stand did not shoot properly. And just opposite, there were German snipers, and they just shot 4 of the members of this Polish insurgent unit.
To byli właśnie ci chłopcy, którzy mieli tę nowoczesną broń i oni zostali pierwsi wzięci na cel. To był ten moment, który nam pokazuje, że powstanie by się i tak wydarzyło, ponieważ
this moment shows us that the Warsaw Rising would have erupted anyway, because those young people were so motivated to take revenge on Germans, and we wanted to fight for the freedom of our country. And we wanted to liberate Warsaw first before Soviets do that.
Mój dziadek pojawił się na ekshumacji, to była zima. Wiedział już od swojej córki, która też uczestniczyła w powstaniu warszawskim, że jego syn zginął.
My grandfather participated in the exhumations during the winter time.
Ale czeka, dlatego że Polek w tym samym momencie od ran
He had to recognize his son, this Andrzej I mentioned, who fell in those very first minutes of the Warsaw Rising.
Jeżeli pójdziesz do powstania, coś strasznego może się wydarzyć. Rodzina się po Tadeusza nie zgłasza. Nie wiadomo dlaczego, być może zginęła. Do dzisiaj nie wiem. I mój dziadek idzie przez noc, przez Warszawę i ciągnie te drzwi. Na tych drzwiach jest tych 2 chłopców, ich ciała. Ciągnie ich na szpital, na cmentarz Pokonskowski. I się zastanawiam, co sobie wtedy musiał myśleć. Warszawa jest kompletnie zniszczona.
We need to remember that Warsaw, after the Warsaw Rising, was totally destroyed, torn down to foundations. And so many families who came here to identify their closed ones had to identify them, find the corpses of their beloved ones and identify them.
Walki o wolność po prostu była w tych dziewczynach i w tych chłopcach. Ale dzisiaj dużo łatwiej nam jest odpowiedzieć na to pytanie, bo przecież Warszawa jest piękna.
And today, when you look at Warsaw, Warsaw is so beautiful. There's so many beautiful buildings, and Warsaw flourishes. But we need to state that Warsaw was rebuilt thanks to you, insurgents of Warsaw, because we share the same values as you did. We have these values in our DNA. At that time, you were all together. I question myself what they shared in common. And when you look at the people today, at politicians, we also come from different political parties, but our fathers fought for the freedom of Poland. That's what we share in common.
Polacy, katolicy, ale również protestanci, również prawosławni, również Żydzi, nie tylko Polacy, pluton słowacki.
We need to remember that during the Warsaw Rising, People were of different descent.
Roger Bartlett, który był Francuzem z Metzu,
There were
wcielony do
even
Wehrmachtu,
foreigners who came
się
here.
dezerterował i walczył w powstaniu warszawskim. Czy Jeźimir Danglicz, Serb, Czecnik, zesłany na przymusowe roboty, który również uciekł i walczył w powstaniu warszawskim. Notabene później został przez Anglików wydany Tito i rozstrzelany. John Ward, lotnik RAF-u, też walczył w powstaniu warszawskim. Czy August Brown, Warszawa, czarnoskóry Nigeryjczyk, perkusista jazzowy.
The president of the Mayor of Warsaw enumerates different participants of the Warsaw Rising who came from different countries to fight here for the freedom of Poland, that they shared the same values, the same as shared by the participants of the Warsaw Rising who were Poles fighting for the freedom of Poland. Please be back in a few minutes. Now we'll try to join Patrick, who's some stories to share with you right now.
So I've managed to find 3 more people who are walking around Warsaw streets. Can you tell us your names, please?
Hina.
Fatima. Herschel.
And you guys are from Canada.
Yes, yeah.
Go Canada.
Yay! The Raptors won this year. Woo!
Yes, they did. I don't know what sport that is, but
Basketball.
basketball, indeed. I was not necessarily the best at no, not at all. Well, we're happy for Canada's success in that field. Now, you guys have been here for about 10 days.
Yes, in Poland around 10 days. Yeah.
And where have you been?
We've been to Gdansk, we've been to Warsaw, we've been to Krakow.
Awesome Polish pronunciation.
Oh no, that was horrible.
Those Google apps have been working out right now. And in terms of like your basically like how you found Poland, was it what you were expecting?
Yeah, like I like a lot of history. It was much more beautiful than I imagined. Like it's just everything's just so gorgeous. I'm like taking a lot of Instagram pictures and things like that, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I have to go to Poland. Everything's so beautiful."
So can we do an advert for your Instagram account so people can find out?
Oh, I don't even like it's not public. No, I'm a teacher. I don't.
One of those. Concept of privacy. What do we do? You're live on television right now, so. So let's maybe talk about history, because as you said, you're a teacher of history.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
What did you know about, let's talk about Polish history and the Warsaw Uprising. Did you know anything about it living in Canada?
Not that much. Like I knew about like World War II, and like I teach it from a Canadian perspective. And I was telling one of my coworkers, "Oh, I'm going to Poland, and then I'm going to Warsaw." And she told me about the museum because she took a class trip actually to Poland, and they went to the museum, and she said it was really good. Yes, the Warsaw Uprising Museum. And then we did a tour around here too, and they mentioned the museum. So it's our last day here, and we're like, "Oh, we haven't gone yet." So we went this morning, and it was great.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So you went into the museum not really knowing about the story of the uprising, and what did you find there? What was the experience like?
It's just you could tell the struggle that people went through, right? Like I knew about World War II, and about the ghettos, and then about the Holocaust, but I didn't know about what the people in Warsaw actually went through, and then.
And so recently, yes. Yes.
And then it's so astonishing to see, like, we're in this beautiful square, and then it's all gone, and now it's here back again, and it's
So you guys saw the photos of these buildings around it?
Yes, yeah.
And how do you feel at that moment you see that?
About the reconstruction?
The destruction.
Oh, it's insane. Like, you can't imagine that.
How fast you'll have put this back together again. How quickly you have put this back together again.
Well, fortunately, it wasn't me. My hands are far too soft for that kind of work. I can hold a microphone. Yeah, but you think about the incredible effort to get all of these buildings.
Yeah, it's crazy because we live in Canada, and it's a very modern type of society. We don't have any of these beautiful buildings, so it's really hard to imagine that this was put up so recently, and it's not. And so fast, yeah.
Now, I'm interested, you talked about teaching Second World War history from a Canadian point of view. As a British person, I have to admit, I didn't know really anything about Poland because you just read it from a British point of view. And that is also a Canadian point of view because we're on the same side. I don't know if you know that. I'm kidding. At least in that war, not in the other wars. And I just wonder, like, from Poland's perspective, we want this story to be better known around the world. It's one of the reasons why we're doing this live, Rising 44 Live, www.rising44live.com. And hashtag Rising44Live. And, what should Poland be doing to get its story better out to people like yourself and to your students?
Well, I was saying a little bit to you beforehand that usually when I go traveling to a new country, I like to do a little bit of research, know a little bit of the history before I come. And I was stressed for time, and I didn't have time to do a lot of reading. So it's is there a documentary or something that I could watch quickly and kind of absorb some information? And it was hard to find something in English that talked a lot about the history in an engaging way too, because some of it, is that voice that kind of puts you to sleep in those documentaries. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Have you been watching my films again?
No. But that dated type of stuff. So something a little bit more modern, more fresh with that new perspective.
And as a teacher, do you look for videos or books or, like textbooks? What would be your first port of call?
A combination of things. In this case, it was going to be like a documentary or something quick because I didn't have that much time to read a whole novel. But even in my class, when I teach, I always like to use little snippets because otherwise kids will fall asleep just listening to me talk all the time. So I like to have these little snippets of little videos so they're okay, there's something visual that I could see instead of this me going on and on.
And as you're standing, say, inside the museum and you're looking at these red and white armbands that these soldiers were wearing, what did you feel at this moment? I'm going to pass the microphone around.
Yes. No, please, no, please take it back to
It was amazing to see there was that pillar, and then I think it was going through all the different floors. And I also saw an elderly man wearing one too, and he had a cane, and I don't know what his story was, but it was this. Yeah. That was oh my God, it kind of made that connection. Oh my gosh, this is not as long ago that you think of. And then he's going through this museum, and this look on his face, and this is real, right? Yeah. We're not talking about a fairy tale thing. Well, it's not a fairy tale, but we're not talking about this story that we can't connect to. This is something that people here went through.
But it's very much I think for the Second World War, from a Western perspective, I'm generalizing massively here, it was pretty successful. Some people even said they had a good war. That was a common phrase for a certain generation of people who fought in the war. It wasn't like that here. And I just wonder, as you guys have gone around Poland, have you seen the flags and the kind of the patriotism on? Have you seen that in the places you visited?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, even this a couple of hours ago, I saw someone in their backpack having the flag. And I was oh, that's so interesting, because in Canada we don't really do that, right? And I was oh, people are very, very proud. And then there's a lot of Polish Canadians too back home, and they're extremely proud as well.
Well, listen, guys, you've been fantastic. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
Thank you so much.
Unfortunately, you guys are going back tomorrow, aren't you? But I have good news for you. The good news is that all day tomorrow we will be live broadcasting online on Facebook and YouTube, and I already know you how to use your phone, and on www.rising44live.com. So you guys can actually be in Warsaw for every minute, every hour, and the entire day. And basically, from my perspective, you guys are also going to have a little part of Warsaw with you when you go back, and I really hope that maybe you can share the story of the city of Warsaw with your students.
For sure. Yeah, it's going to be a thing that
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a safe trip back. See you guys then. Well, I actually felt very, very moved there by what the ladies were saying, because you can see that what they've seen when they came to the Warsaw Rising Museum has touched them. And they're going to take a little bit of that story, the story of these walls and these streets and these buildings, with them. Now, before I pass over back to Ola at Plac Kaczyński, at Kaczyński Place, I just want to reflect on the brutality of the battle. So at the start of the uprising, the joy and the happiness on the streets here, it wouldn't have been a million miles from what we can see now. You can see people, you can see couples coming together, families meeting. The extreme joy at the fact that after so many years of German Nazi occupation, of repression, of street roundups, of murders, of the ghetto uprising in 1943, of the brutality, the beatings, the robbings, and all manner of other, frankly, just absolutely barbaric treatment, people were able to come out onto the streets. they were able to wave the Polish flag. And they were doing it not having been liberated by any other army, but having taken back their capital city in the largest capital city rising at any city in the whole of the Second World War. So if you look at Paris and Prague, both those battles were over in days. Warsaw's battle, as we know, went on for 63 days. But for the first couple of weeks, the joy here was pretty intense. Then, as the battle came westwards, as German SS units, frankly murderous rapists and thugs, took over the Wola and Ochota districts in the west and the southwest of the city, they started to push forward to the streets where we are now. And the battle was intense. Now, the one greatest advantage of this historic old town, which had been rebuilt by the Poles after the Swedish deluge, was that the walls were 3 meters thick. The streets were narrow. Tanks couldn't get through. Sniping positions were excellent. Machine gun nests could be built. And the Poles had had plenty of times to build barricades against the Goliath mines that were coming in, that the Germans were attempting to use to blow down walls. So the battle that happened here was brutal because the Germans couldn't move forward. And in his rage, Himmler, who had personally taken Hitler's orders to destroy the city from the face of the earth, threw everything he could against Warsaw's old town. Heavy artillery from the north of the position where we are now. Stuka dive bombers coming in literally dozens of times a day. And when you listen to the reports of people who survived the cataclysm of hell that took place on these very streets, you'll know that what they went through was one of the most traumatic experiences you could ever possibly imagine. Well, I'm going to pass back to Ola now, and we're going to continue to look for people to find out their stories. Please share in the comments your story about what you think the Warsaw Rising means to you.
Welcome back to the Krasiński Square, where we are here together with thousands of people of Warsaw who have gathered for the official commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Rising. My name is Ola Duda, and I'm honored to be with you today for this online broadcast at hashtag Rising44 Live. Please leave your comments in the comments section. How do you feel about the Warsaw Rising? What does it mean to you? We are extremely grateful that this initiative was made possible to micro donations, so thank you to all of you who have contributed to make our dream possible. We are now hearing the roll call for the fallen, so names of those who fell for Poland are being called up. Members of different battalions, units that fought for the freedom of Poland during the Warsaw Rising. You may see that one of the soldiers who was specially designated for the occasion reads all these names, as well as the names of generals who decided to start the Warsaw Rising. Coming back to the history of the Rising, we need to remember that when the Warsaw Rising started, there were 35,000 insurgents against 20,000 Germans. And among the participants of the Warsaw Rising, 65% of them were under 25. So these were really young people who were extremely motivated to drive Germans from the city of Warsaw. Please note that the Warsaw Rising politically was against Soviets who were approaching the gates of Warsaw. But as for military reasons, it was against Germans who were occupying Poland for very long 5 years. And now we hear that paramedics, doctors, and all auxiliary forces are being called up to stand here, and then we'll hear glory to the heroes being mentioned and repeated by the soldiers who have gathered here.
Naczelnego kapelana Armii Krajowej oraz błogosławionego księdza Józefa Stanka, pseudonim Rudy, kapelana zgrupowania Kryska. Ojców Józefa Warszawskiego,
Many names of the priests are being called up too, as lots of priests assisted the participants of the Warsaw Rising all through the difficult days of the Warsaw Rising, and many of them were killed by Germans. You may see that the whole ceremony takes place next to the beautiful monument of the Warsaw Rising, which was unveiled in 1989, so for the 45th anniversary of the Warsaw Rising. Memory about the Rising lived in the hearts of its participants for a very long time. In Poland, we had communist authorities which treated insurgents as enemies of the state. So participants of the Rising would meet in secret for many, many years, and only in this way they could discuss what happened in the past. They could pay tribute to their friends who fell during the Rising. And now the names of those who were engaged in underground state are being called up, because during World War II, Poland had a huge structure of the Polish underground authorities. We had so many 100,000 people involved in underground government, in the underground teaching system, underground military forces. Our underground Home Army counted up to 400,000 soldiers. And now the soldiers of the army that tried to join the Warsaw Rising are being called up. Those soldiers who fought among the Red Army, Joseph Stalin allowed only for this one thing, for Polish soldiers who fought along the Red Army to cross the Vistula River, in this way help the insurgents. Unfortunately, he did not assist this disembarkment mission, neither with artillery nor with the aircraft, so more than 3,000 of them got killed by Germans trying to cross the Vistula River. And now all those who tried to help Warsaw and were engaged in underground state and fought in the woods, all the guerrilla members who tried to join the Warsaw Rising at that time and tried to help the insurgents, are being called up.
Oraz 30. Dywizji Piechoty Armii Krajowej z okręgu poleckiego Kwadra. Stańcie do apelu! Do was wołam z
You've just heard soldiers shout, "Glory to the heroes."
Wielu okrytych chwałą bojową oddziałów powstańczych. Stańcie do apelu! Wzywam bohaterskich lotników polskich sił zbrojnych na zachodzie.
And now the airmen are being called up
eskadry specjalnego przeznaczenia.
because during the Warsaw Rising, the British, Canadian, South African, American and Soviet airmen tried to come here in airline missions to drop supplies. Many of them unfortunately died during these missions. We still remember their sacrifice. They fell as airmen.
Wzywam policjantów II Rzeczypospolitej, walczących na barykadach powstańczych.
So in this way, the roll call for the fallen continues. Please be back to us in a minute, and please leave your comments in the comment section. How do you feel about the Warsaw Rising? I'd like to remind you too that this online transmission is possible only thanks to micro donations that were given to us, and I'll be back to you in a minute. Thank you.
I'm now going to read some emotional words from a book which for me has been one of absolutely the best guides to the Warsaw Uprising, and I heartily recommend it to you. It's called Warsaw 1944, and it's by Alexandra Ritchie, who's a historian. I've yet to meet her, but I very much hope to. And she describes the battle that was taking place in the streets behind me. And, you know, sometimes I think it can be easy to get lost in the heroism of the soldiers that fought, but it's also extremely important to remember the experience that people went through on these streets. In Warsaw, they were known as krowa, or cows, as the noise sounded like dozens of beasts crying out in their death throes. Irena Orska called them the most terrifying of all the weapons the Germans used against the Home Army in Warsaw. One can only imagine the fear they caused amongst the trapped civilians of the old town. So this is referring to this later date as the battle goes on into August, the last 2 weeks of August. The first of them to be used in Warsaw was a 6-barreled rocket launcher. Shells could be fired from specially tilted metal racks. They came in their own packing crates, and when the Soviets arrived, they found thousands of their discarded wooden cases lying in gigantic piles on the edge of the old town, a testament to the number of shells launched from there. The bombs were designed to destroy life in the most ruthless way, and they succeeded. Untold thousands died in the old town. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about the building that we have behind us. And I quote, victims had their faces burned the colour of mahogany wardrobe, covered with strips of gauze bandages. They were covered in bandages all over, and they walked stiffly like totem poles, constantly moving because they had been burned alive and they could not keep still. They were still living and yet were not alive. Now that's a scene which, once you've heard, is quite hard to get out of your mind. And there are very many photos of the victims of those krowa, these cows, these moaning minis, as they were called, that were fired in their thousands into the very streets that were behind us. So when you walk across Warsaw, you are quite literally walking on the burial grounds of thousands of victims, literally tens of thousands of people. Now, that can be a depressing thought. I'd like to share with you now my reflection on what I think the Warsaw Uprising means to me. And someone actually put this better to me on my page earlier today when I gave out this question. For me, I think about those children, young teenagers, and their willingness to give something up for their country. And not only their willingness to try and do that, but their willingness to carry on. And then I think about what the civilians went through in the fervour and the excitement of regaining their freedom. And then, as the battle continues to get worse and worse, as conditions get just so horrific, you think about the strength, the conviction behind both those acts, the willingness to fight and the willingness to fight on. And then you think about that willingness expressed not over 1, 2, 3 or 4 days, like the capture of Paris, or the retaking of Paris, but over 63 days. And that to me speaks untold volumes around the strength of humanity in the hardest of times, the value of freedom and sovereignty and dignity and self-determination. Because that is what these people were fighting for. It was what they did give their lives to fight for. And as we go through now these stories... Hello, guys. Where are you guys from? Oh, come and talk to me. I'm British. You have to come and talk to me. Would you like to come around here? We'll talk about the Warsaw Uprising. Yeah, come over here, guys, because we're... Yeah, it'll be a nice... You're going to become internet stars. Internet stars. So we're going to interrupt this just to talk to these nice people. So guys, we're live on Facebook right now. You can search for the hashtag Rising44Live and anyway. Hello guys.
Hello.
So you're from London?
We're from London.
I'm obliged to ask which bit of London.
We're from southwest, so Richmond Dealing Way.
Oh, that's fine. I don't like people from North London. I'm only kidding. So why are you guys in Poland?
We're in Poland on holiday, and we've popped into Warsaw today because of the Warsaw Uprising commemorations.
Oh, awesome. Are you going to be here tomorrow as well?
We're not here tomorrow because we're carrying on, and it's a bit much with the babies and the kids. But we are here because my granny fought in the Warsaw Uprising.
Oh, fantastic.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So I wanted the kids to come and see a little bit of it.
Great-grandpa also did.
And your great-grandpa, yeah. Granny and great-granny and your great-grandpa fought, didn't they?
So, has Mum told you about what they did?
A little bit.
My mum's told me a few stories.
Man, that's awesome. Mum, can you tell us maybe for the viewers right now?
What do you want to tell them? Shall I tell them the tank story? Because that was round here. I was actually just looking for the plaque.
Yeah.
So there's the one with the plaque of the tank that blew up. Do you know that story? Yeah. So that was my granny. So my granny was there when the tank was brought in through the barricades, and it was her friends that brought the tank in, thinking that it was a tank that had been left behind and they'd be able to then fight back with this tank, because obviously they didn't have any armour of their own. And she was at the front of the balcony, and she thought, gosh, my friends are going to be so disappointed that they aren't here to witness this with me. So she ran back inside, woke them up, and when they got back, the whole balcony was obviously full, and there was just them standing on the frame. And then they realised the tank was booby-trapped, it blew up. The balcony fell, the building fell, and it was just my granny with her two friends.
Oh my God! So seconds.
Yep. And so as I was explaining to our son that it was because she wanted to share all her good things with her friends, that's why she survived, and she was lucky.
And also great granddad as well.
And great granddad as well.
So were they together at the time?
They were not together at the time, but they got together shortly after the war in Italy. They met up in Italy again after the war.
Because my mum told me that after the war, my great granny was coming to Italy because she couldn't stay in Poland, and she went to Italy and then she met him, and she remembered because her friend saw him, and she just said, I just saw your friend. And then they came and decided to get married.
So it's like an epic love story.
A bit of an epic love story. They were in the same battalion, but they weren't together at the time. My grandmother lost a fiance in the uprising. My grandfather lost a wife in the uprising, and then they met reunited in Italy, and they got together and got married in Italy.
And also that my granny was feeling brave when she fighted on the war.
That's right, she was very brave, wasn't she? Because she was only 16. Yeah.
She was 16?
She was 16. Well, she was 16 when war broke out, so she was in...
So having kids as you do now...
Yes.
And thinking about 16,
Yeah, horrific. So we, rightly or wrongly, they don't know the full horrors. I was brought up knowing the full horrors, and it was just normal to me. And for whatever reason, we haven't gone into quite so much detail with them, but they will definitely know, and they'll learn it slowly as they grow up.
So have you guys been interested in what you found here?
Do you like I've been asking my mum to tell me stories.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he wants to know lots of stories, don't you? And you know that there are a lot of sad stories, don't you? That it was really scary for them and they were super brave.
Yeah, so my little daughter Zosha, she's about, so you, how old are you, like 7, 8? 5? So big. What are they feeding them in 7. South London? What? You can say, okay. I'm like, my timing's all out.
How many Zosha friends have you got?
Also that when we went to Poland, we felt like on the car journey we felt sick, but me and my brother survived it because we really were hungry.
Completely on an angle there.
I mean, it is essentially a good rule to always feed the kids, so that is helpful. But coming back to this kid thing, like how do you explain? Because this is something else. This isn't,
You can't explain it. I mean, you can't explain it. I mean, they obviously... Well, I know my grandmother felt fierce patriotism. I mean, I speak Polish, the kids speak Polish, despite the fact that Granny moved to London in her 20s and taught her kids Polish, taught us kids Polish, and it was all very important to her. So, to be honest, in our hearts, I feel like a Polish person at heart. Although I come to Poland and they call me a foreigner because I speak with an accent. And I go to London, they're like, well, you're not quite an English person because you're also Polish. So, yeah, there's a very fierce patriotism of the people that fought, definitely.
And have you guys been to the Uprising Museum today? How have you remembered it?
I have before. We didn't come today. Today was more of I wanted the kids just to know that they were here for it. At 5 and 7, there's only so much they'll remember it. For me, it was important to pop in and just to sort of say hello, pay my respects in whatever ways possible with 3 small kids.
Oh God, yeah. At least it's not 35. Mind you, it was 38 in London last week. So, and can you just tell me your grandmother and grandfather's names were?
Yes. So my grandmother was Wanda from home Bagniewska, and then became Sarnecka when she married my grandfather. And my grandfather was Wojciech Sarnecki, and they fought in Battalion Gustav in Compania Anna.
Oh, Gustav, of course. Yeah, so you can find that street. So the plaque's just over there.
Yeah, that's right.
And actually on some of the lower floor columns you can still see the shrapnel marks and the explosion marks. So you can literally touch, as I always think about it, it's like literally touching history, which for boys can be
so that's what we're going to go
pretty cool. Okay, guys, you're fantastic. Always pester mum for food if you get hungry. I'm sure it's a little bit late now. It's coming up to bedtime.
It's coming up to bedtime.
I was asking my mum for snacks and snacks and snacks, so I wouldn't. But I ate a big dinner, so I'm not that hungry after 2 scoops of ice cream, a big dinner, and lots of snacks.
Oh, don't talk about ice cream if my daughter's watching. I'm going to get my wife in trouble.
We're here just for a little bit, but my mum is here with her sister in honour of their parents, who have since passed away, and with a lot of their friends are here. So it's nice to see that a lot of the kids of the people from the Warsaw Uprising are here commemorating and have flown in from all over the world. So that's really nice to see.
So we're going to pass over to my colleague Ola Duda, who's over at Plac Kraszyński. So we've got 2 people right now. She's a guide at the Warsaw Museum. I want you now to give a message to the foreign people, British people, Canadian people, American people, Australian people, and English-speaking people who are watching this right now about what the Warsaw Uprising should mean to them.
Oh God, land me in it, why don't you? Well, I think it shows a real spirit and real strength of character of all the people that did fight. They obviously, no one person did it single-handedly. They did it all together with their friends, and they felt that there was definitely a strength by doing it together with their friends. And the main thing really is, as with everything to do with this, is just to do everything we can to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. Well, I can agree with that. Thank you, guys. High fives all around. Awesome. You guys are awesome. Thanks, Mum. You guys are awesome. See you guys later. Well, that was an extraordinary moment. And, of course, I think as you walk around the streets there, you're going to find a lot of people with stories like that, families. Back over to Ola. Cześć.
Welcome back to the Kraszyński Square, where we are today to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Warsaw Rising. This is just the start of the official commemoration. Yesterday, the participants of the Warsaw Rising met the Mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, and the President of the Republic of Poland, Andrzej Duda. Today, we participated in the Holy Mass at the Kraszyński Square, and we've just heard the roll call for the fallen. Right now the ceremony of laying the wreaths, flowers, takes place when the government officials and representatives of different organizations pay their tribute and homage to those who fell for Poland at that time. You may see that thousands of Warsawians gathered here to be today with the participants of the Warsaw Rising. We are extremely grateful that so many of you made possible this online transmission, thanks to which so many Poles abroad may be with us, following hashtag Rising44 live. Please be with us also tomorrow. We are starting at 8:45, and all through the day we'll be with you to show what's going on in Warsaw, at heart of Poland. It's all from me, Alexandra Duda. Thank you for watching. Please be with us tomorrow, and back to Patrick.
Well, it's amazing the people you'll meet, and Julia is one of these people that I've been following on Twitter for quite a while. You're basically like Poland's greatest interwar music promoter, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I just really enjoy this music, and I think it speaks, volumes, and it speaks across cultures, and that's why I love it. Yeah.
What's your Polish connection?
So my father's parents were born in Poland. They were born in the east. They were born in a territory that's now in Ukraine. And then when the war happens, they were both, we think, deported to Germany. Throughout the war, in slave labour camps. For my grandmother, we don't really know about my grandfather. And then after the war, they chose to have a life in the UK and never spoke about Poland again.
Oh, so there's, and this essentially probably, I'm imagining, is a thing that you really want to solve.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been doing sort of family history research into it, but it's a difficult journey because you're dealing with really traumatic events. As this area, this country has gone through such trauma, and I think, yes, I would love to know, but equally it's hard because it's family and it's blood, and yeah.
Well, I personally hope that you do come to finding that. Why are you in Warsaw at the moment? Have you come for these Warsaw Uprising commemorations?
Partly, yes. I like timing my visits to be here then, because I think it's so important to remember. And yeah, absolutely. But I'm also interning and working for Culture PL. So I'm writing about Polish culture, promoting Polish culture abroad.
Now, the question we're asking people as we walk around Warsaw is, what does the Warsaw Uprising mean to them, and perhaps what should it mean to other people? What's your view on that?
I think that this should be taught in schools across the world. I don't understand why in UK schools, why this isn't taught in US schools. From my experience, I came across this purely by chance, and in retrospect, I think, how did I come across this by chance when this is such a core part of this beautiful city, this beautiful country, and it's something that everyone should know about. I mean, we're here standing behind this monument to a child soldier, and that is the most emotional of monuments, and yet in the UK people don't know about it. Why is that? And I think your work is great to promote this.
Well, I wasn't asking for the free plug, but I'll definitely accept that compliment. What else should Poland be doing to promote the story of the Warsaw Uprising?
I think talking about what was going on in the uprising and really pushing it abroad. So this is also a plug. Culture PL writes articles about what was.
Stop plugging your work. Keep plugging my work.
So they're writing articles. So I think yes, social media is great for this, and this this kind of thing, live broadcasts, but also maybe having school trips here, and really talking about school trips for the 1st of August as well, so that children here can see how much this city remembers and how much this city appreciates that history.
Juliet, where are we going to be tomorrow?
So I'm going to be probably in the centre of town, just sort of looking and remembering, and I always spend those minutes just in silence thinking about all of that energy and valour and heroism that went into this beautiful city and kept it alive.
And how can people who want to find out more about interwar Polish music, which is awesome, how can they find you and what you do?
So my Twitter is JC Breton, and I tweet quite regularly. I also write for Culture PL, and so mainly on Twitter, I suppose. I also have a blog which is called Visions of the Vistula, which I update really infrequently. I should probably update it more, but yeah, I mean, just Twitter and social media and that kind of thing. And also YouTube is great for finding these songs, so just type in Polish interwar music and you will find a wealth of these.
And of course, Mieczysław Fogg was one of the artists who was playing in courtyards around Warsaw as well. When you hear that music, does it kind of, it makes you feel like you're there?
It does, absolutely. And I mean, Fogg himself, he performed, I think, over 100 times during the uprising, which is just incredible. And I was reading his memoirs, and he says, what singer has had an audience like this? These child soldiers, these young girls and boys listening to his music and remembering, the brighter times that have gone, but also keeping that spirit of Poland alive.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us. That was quite a happy coincidence, and I think we're going to have a lot more happy coincidences as we go throughout this day. Now, I need you to do something. I need you to be a part of this campaign. We've got a fantastic team, studio. We've had Ola, Carol, I've got Marius on the other side of this camera, and we've been working for literally weeks to put this together. Today was the tester. Today was the sample. Today we just went in a bit lightly, but tomorrow we are going to be there from 9 o'clock in the morning all the way through to the late afternoon, up until 6 or 7 o'clock. We will be live streaming from all of the major events. I've got a very special event that I can't tell you about yet, which is going to be happening tomorrow, so you're going to have to wait for that. But we're just going to have some incredible moments throughout the course of the day. So what I need you to do is to be a part of this. We had several hundred people help us with the financing for doing this, but we want tens of thousands of people to help us now. First thing, let us know what you think the Warsaw Uprising means to you. Let us know what values you think it can teach you. Secondly, send this on to as many people as you can. Thirdly, tune in tomorrow using the hashtag Rising44Live on Facebook and YouTube, and of course go onto our website www.rising44live.com. The simple fact of the matter is that to get the message of the Warsaw Uprising out to as many people as possible, we can't do it without you. So I want you now to write in the comments and make me a promise, and my co-host as well, Ola, a promise that you will play your part in telling that story, because without you, the story does remain buried. We need every single one of you to play your part. So guys, it's 8:30. It's been emotional, but today is just a foretaste of things to come, because tomorrow, the whole of Poland, the whole of Warsaw, and thanks to the Rising 44 Live campaign, the whole of the world will stop for a moment to remember Warsaw, the city that survived its own death. I'll see you tomorrow.